This is The Collective Voice, and you're tuning in to Faith Transitions,
exploring the challenges and opportunities at the crossroads of ministry and innovation.
Everyone, and welcome to another episode of Faith Transitions. I'm Phil Dickey, the Director of Congregational Innovation at Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary, and I'm joined today by Stephen Mackintosh. And what a gift this is, because I have known Stephen. I think, Stephen, you were probably a freshman in high school whenever I first met you.
Probably freshman year. I think the big first time we hung out was on a mission trip, I want to say sophomore year.
Was it sophomore year?
That we went to like Far, Texas, or was it Star, Texas?
Far. I think it was Far. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude,
But yeah, good times.
That was the trip where the year before was the last time we'd gone to Juarez for a trip, because we used to go that church used to go every spring break. And then when we were there was definitely a shooting that took place while we were there. Actually, two shootings that took place while we were there. And so we could no longer go to Juarez, and it was like this big deal. And we thought, no one's going to go on this trip to Far. Mm-hmm. We're going to try it. And then like 150 people signed up to go or something like that. It was just absolutely bananas. But that was a great trip. It was
great. It was like, I remember it really fondly. And my friend group for like a while, that was something that we would talk about. So yeah, since then, like Phil and I been good friends. So
yeah, known each other for quite a long time. So really, again, as people often who listen to this know, Faith Transitions is really a show that just invites young adults to talk about the experiences of the transitions that we go through in young adulthood. And I said we, like I'm still one of them, and I have transitioned out of that phase. So did you know, dude, I turned 40 recently. Isn't that crazy? Yeah.
You look good, man.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. But anyway, so yeah, just recognizing that once you graduate college or whatever like kind of like in between the high school and whatever the next phase is, there's so many things that happen in the midst of transitions. And so I would love to hear how you've gotten from college to where you now run a Substack called Stained Glass Graffiti, which I freaking love. I love that title, by the way.
Good.
It's so good. And as I was like reading through some of them, like there's such an underlying like faith proponent to it, which the kind of general realm of it, from what I gather, is this idea of sustainability and technology, which are both things that I care deeply about, and why I was so like really interested and want to talk to you about this. But I'd love to hear like you went to undergrad. I'd love to know where you went to undergrad, and then like just kind of like tell the story a little bit about like what it was like emerging out of undergrad, and like a little bit of where faith played a role in those things, but then like kind of the steps you've taken to get where you are now.
Right. So yeah, I went to undergrad at UT Austin, and I was
heard of it.
You heard of it? I was studying a very technical degree, civil engineering, and things seemed to all be headed in that direction. I knew early on that I didn't really enjoy it, but I didn't know what else I wanted to do. So I actually had a big family crisis in college where my dad got injured, and so that sort of reframed things and helped me think about things. It was actually on this day, several years ago.
No way.
12 years ago, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So anyway, but that sort of made me look inwardly at my life and like and things like that. So by the end of college, I kind of decided I really wanted to. I was looking at what my degree was going towards, which I saw engineering as like creating a lot of waste in the world, and like supporting systems that were just geared up for producing things that wore away quickly. And I was always pretty ecologically motivated, I guess you could say, just going camping with my family growing up and things like that. Always really connected with nature and thought it a really important part of human life. And so I wanted to get involved with that more, and I wanted to understand more about it. So the first thing I did when I graduated college was I went and I worked on a farm in Virginia. So I think we had talked about that before, but I wanted to learn about, pretty much like the roots of like what the civilization has become and what like where we are at in society, and sort of how we maintain health and just foundational things like that. And I ended up going from that into teaching.
Hold on. Step on that one for a second, because I think that's a big step, right? To go from being at UT, being in Austin, you're from Dallas, so like you've basically only known big cities, right?
Yeah.
So to only know big cities, that all of a sudden be out on a farm in Virginia,
Mm-hmm.
like was that part of the appeal? Like you've only known big cities, so like get me
Well,
out of the city for a little while.
I think I was, there were a couple of things going on. At least there was the appeal of doing something totally different. There was, I grew up in this cushy neighborhood, this rich neighborhood in Dallas, and like I've never, there's like a whole other part of the world that I don't know how they live, and I want to understand. I don't want to just like float through life on, um, you know, people would say privilege, and things like that. I want to know how other people are living, and what a manual labor is like, things like that. When you're really depending on it, and so there were things like that. I think also, I was also just sort of running from some things, and just I was having like a bit of a faith crisis as well, and just I really wanted to be close to the land, and like just like a restart, and like these things happening at once. So trying to find God through that as well.
So you grew up in the church, right?
I did, yeah. I grew up in an Episcopal church in Dallas.
Which I'm not an expert on the Episcopal church by any means, but like I don't feel like, especially in Dallas, there's a huge like ecological, let's get in touch with nature kind of version of faith typically, right?
No, it's interesting. Yeah, it's hard to say like where I made that connection, or where that came from. I guess you could say growing up in the church, yeah. We looked at the Bible, and we looked at like liturgy and things like that in the Episcopal Church as being like the way to access God. But then I would have these experiences out in nature, like with family or with friends, or things like that. And I, I think I just felt God there too, and just made that connection of mapping those onto each other, and saying, uh, and even like reading the Bible, and like these people, um, they like go out to the wilderness to like meditate and to pray and things like that. And I'm like, there's something there. There's some type of connection there that like I enjoy. I think people, universally need. So I think that's probably where that connection was made.
Wait, like we're more natural in a environment of like trees rather than just concrete jungles, maybe? Is that what you
Exactly. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I feel that the depth of my bones. Like that's why I have to escape out of Dallas from time to time too, just to get away from the crazy. But
Right.
so you said you kind of a bit of a crisis of faith in the midst of it too. Did you feel like being in Virginia on this farm helps you reconnect to the faith portion?
I think it maybe made me initially double down on like some like dogma, like a religious dogma, um, and that was something that I had to deal with too. Um, I think it was isolating, the experience. It was, overall, I think you can reframe things and look at things and learn from them. There was a lot that I enjoyed and a lot I learned, but it was pretty isolating experience. And so that with like, okay, my life is about like prayer. I was kind of going towards like monkhood almost, I was like, I'm a wake up like even 45 minutes before I have to, which is super early, just so I can like read the Bible and like get the day started. So I was super like headed in that monk direction, um, and it was sort of like strengthening this dogmatic view of religion. So in a way, I mean, yeah, it's like my prayer life was probably pretty fruitful, and like I was really connecting with scripture in that time. But then I would go back to a city, and meet up with friends and people, and I just didn't really feel like I was connecting with people, and I missed that.
That's yeah, and that's really interesting. Kind of this sense that it has to be a both and, right? Like I say has to, maybe it doesn't have to, but I feel like it's really hard to be a Christian on an island. I feel like inherently the idea of Christianity is this connection to community and others, and hard to love your neighbor if you're literally, there are no neighbors, So, I love that you like, that was kind of the disconnect that you felt, was just this lack of connection to people. So how did you remedy? Like what came out of that then?
Well, honestly, I hadn't thought about this in a little minute, but so I was out there in this town called Palmyra, which on the sign it says population 200,
That's
and
even smaller than my hometown, man, which doesn't happen very often.
it's crazy. It was so small, and I would go to church out there, and I was like, I remember the first time I went in, and just like all the heads turned, they're like a new person,
Under the age of like 40.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, but I would go in. I was probably 45 minutes from Charlottesville, where UVA is, and I had one of my closest childhood friends out there in Charlottesville, in the UVA med school program, and he was living with a bunch of guys who I hadn't yet met, and we're on this group text still. They're lifelong friends now too. But I would go there and to get human interaction. And it was a college town. It was vibrant. It was fun. And so that sort of broke that shell a little bit, and kind of was like, oh, wow, I really like walking around this like brick town, like going to bookstores and like going out with friends on weekend nights. And like, I don't have to be like some type of saint, living out in the wilderness, but I can, still have like a very full spiritual life, and like at the same time a full social life, of really connecting with people and having fun. Fun is good.
Yeah, I love the idea of kind of like an everyday saint, right? That there's a way to live out that faith in the midst of everyday life, and not just having to do it in seclusion. And again, I feel like some people have that call to be a monk or to be set apart, and not whatever it is, and God bless him, that's not me. Like, I so much thrive on community and needing to be around people. And so I hear you, and I think that's a great perspective on the midst of it. What was it like? Did you find nourishment in that small town church that you were part of for a while?
This, like, I got emotional a little bit there, because I just remembered for the first time in forever that the pastor of that church, I can't remember his name, but he, went up to me before the church service that first time I went, and I probably only went, a handful of times, 4 or 5 times. But he went up to me that first time, before the service, and then I remember he came up to me after, and he would just keep up with me, and we exchanged phone numbers. And I remember one time I was there in my trailer, because the farm family had their house, and then they had gotten a trailer for me that I was staying in apart from their house. And he called me one night randomly, and I'm like looking at my phone. I'm like, should I answer it? And I pick it up, and he just wanted to ask me how I was doing, and like learn about me, and just things like that. I think he probably gained the sense that I was lonely, but he just it was kind of like he was checking in on me, but it was also just like we're having a conversation, or he was just like connecting. And I don't know if I've had I guess I have had similar experiences in other churches, but that was really touching. So, and there were a couple members of the congregation that, like, when I told them I was moving, this couple who I think they had lived in New York City or something, and they were retiring out there. They were like, "Come over for dinner," or we had lunch one day in town, at one of the 2 lunch spots in town. So it was a little bit like that. I think it wasn't as instructive or like as full of a church experience as I've had, but it was cool in a lot of ways.
You get to experience that like small town hospitality, huh? Like,
I did, yeah.
So a little bit of a different nourishment, but still nourishment nonetheless, huh?
Right.
Okay, so you're coming out of the midst of this, figuring out what it means to like live out your faith with peers, right? So I'd love to hear, like, what does that look like? How has that played out as far as like continuing this ongoing exploration and development of your faith amongst your peers? Like, how do those conversations come up regularly, or is that something that's like, kind of have my faith and my faith friends here, and then there's my other friends here? What's that look like?
Yeah, just like current day,
Or in the midst of I mean, even in the midst as you were emerging out of this time on the farm.
yeah, at that time, I think the friends that I was hanging out with in Charlottesville were, actually one of them grew up pretty Catholic, and so we would have interesting conversations about faith. And there was actually that house that we lived. I ended up moving in with those guys later on. That house that we lived in, which was the same house that I visited when I was out there farming, was two houses from this huge Catholic church. So there was that one guy that was Catholic. Everyone else, though, like my childhood friend that introduced me to these other guys, is atheist, and I I would assume maybe everyone else is atheist. And some of them had grown up Christian and turned away from it. So it was a little bit like, this is I'm enjoying finding like a healthy life and a full and rich life that's not like, oh, we got to be talking about the Bible all the time. Um, so, uh, but there were always people that grounded me, other old friends that I would keep up with on the phone, and eventually like live closer to and be closer to, who who we would always be checking in. Like Luke Turpin comes to mind as someone who we were always checking in about our spiritual lives and what's going on, and having those honest conversations that like a lot of times you feel like you can't have with a pastor or something like that. So
Shout out Luke. I remember playing ball with Luke back in the day.
yeah, great guy, a great athlete. So
Great athlete. Great athlete. And do you find that still, like, has it changed now? Do you feel like you've had a friend group now that it's more in depth? Like the word I'm looking for maybe is like integrated.
I don't know. Friends, and I'm 31, and like friends in your young 30s is kind of a weird, difficult thing. I think the friends that I rely upon are like the same group of friends that I had when we met. My high school friends, and some of them, we went to the same college together, and we always kept up, and we text every day. And God maybe comes up every once in a while. I don't think we really have serious discussions about God, if I'm being honest. But I mean, Wes is probably the one friend in that group, and then Luke as well, who is someone who I'll turn to have a deeper discussion about, like, oh man, this is something that like I've been praying about, and I don't know how I feel about this, and the spiritual life conversations.
Yeah, I love that you still have those people to lean on and be in connection with. When I was going back and searching through all your internet footprint, I found some of your videos that you created from Camp OTX, which were pretty awesome. That was good stuff, dude.
Oh yeah.
If you're listening, don't know what Camp OTX is, yeah, I mean, that was the inaugural year, right? That was the first year it opened, wasn't it?
No, Wes was there the first year it opened, but
Okay.
I came year 2 or 3.
Okay.
I can't remember. Yeah. But not quite the first year. Yeah.
I guess it's just a Christian summer camp for kids, right? Like that's how they define themselves. Yeah.
Split off of Camp Ozark,
right?
In Arkansas.
Good stuff. No, I love that you still have each other, though. I think it's great that's kind of remarkable to have those friends from high school that you still have that connection point with. That's really good stuff. Okay, so fast forward, you're doing media stuff now, which is, I guess, what you did at camp too, right?
Yes, a little bit. Although I was more just like recruiting for camp. But now I started doing a little bit of recruiting, but I do more media for this business. So it's an events business here in Dallas.
Gotcha.
And I mainly run their social accounts and do some other media things for them. So
very cool. So what led you to start exploring, or I guess re-exploring, this idea between the intersection of sustainability and technology, and obviously you have the background of being on the farm and that kind of ecological aspect of it. But
Mhm.
what led you to then start writing about it and start a Substack and start approaching it that way?
Well, I think writing has always been a really helpful processing tool for me. Helps me understand how I think about something, and it's a fun way for me to learn about things. Because the ideas will be bouncing around in my head, and I'll like have a weird maybe these two things are connected, and maybe like this thing we're experiencing is connected to this other thing. And so it's a cool way for me to research as well and learn. So I've always written. I've always been writing, um, and I sort of a lot of the times when I'm processing things, I'll write poetry, and I also wanted to. So I put some poetry up on Substack, but most of that I either put in other places or plan to put out someday. But the longer form stuff on Substack was a way for me to investigate things I was interested in, make sense of them, um, and be vulnerable and be bold. And I just enjoy I don't know projecting my voice. I enjoy public speaking. I have fairly strong beliefs in the things that I believe in, and I feel the need to stand up for things that I believe in. So I would say it probably the when I got involved in teaching, I was just writing for the job, and then I wanted to create more in depth things for my students, and I ended up just wanting to lean on that creative aspect more, and that's sort of where it came from.
What are some of the things that you're really advocating for, like really beliefs that you're really pushing? I said pushing. It sounds bad,
Pushing
but
it.
like the things that you really want to promote.
Yeah, I think we talk about sustainability, is one of the big things I really write about now. Um, I think the tagline on my Substack says investigating how our values inform our inner and outer world. Um, there's some iceberg, something that came out of psychology or some type of science, where it's like there's people's actions are like the tip of the iceberg poking out of the water, and beneath that there's beliefs, or there might be something else above beliefs, but then there's beliefs, and then there's values below that. And so you see how uh, values sort of create the world around us. And when you talk about pavement and highways in Dallas, that's one thing I've written directly about before, and one thing I really care about is uh, I mean, I get really big picture, but you look at how our economic systems and the value of just expanding your wealth and things like that are connected to when you step outside and your society, the city you live in looks ugly. There's an actual connection to that I've enjoyed exploring, and I want to advocate for richer community, deeper connection with nature, um, production of goods being much more of a closed, healthier circuit than it is now. And then technology is such a big part of all of those things. And technology, I really just see it as it's a type of creativity that creates how we interface with, or how we bring the future to the present. And so
That's
there's a
such a
lot
great
of
definition of technology. I really appreciate you defining that, because I think we use the term technology so often, but don't really, like, we think it's only like a cell phone or something like that. Like there's so
right.
many versions of technology that emerge, and of course that's one way. But like there's just bringing the future to the present to the future. I think that's a really great definition of it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity there. And I don't know if I fit the definition of a futurist, but I think about the future a lot, of where our technology could go. I'm an optimist, and I believe that the opportunity to rebuild Eden, or attain utopia, maybe like always outside of our grasp. I don't know, but like it's worth striving for.
I'm looking on my bookshelf because I have a book about utopia and how like we have to have idealists or we lose sight of it, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think it's so important to continue to pursue ideals.
I do too. Yeah, I think that's an internal struggle within me as well. Cause like,
Really?
yeah, sometimes talking to myself in my head, I'm like, oh, no, this will never be attained. Like, what's the point? You know? And I'm projecting that voice onto like what I think other people will say about certain things I'm writing about.
Yeah.
You're like a hardcore idealist. But ultimately, I believe what you just said, that it's you have to have people that are going to be idealists, or else you don't have that North Star. I'm not saying I'm the North Star, but like people that are standing up for high ideals.
So you live in Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could change anything about Dallas or the community you live in general, what's one or maybe a couple things that you think would change that would lead to a greater sustainability and a more optimistic future for all of us?
So the number one thing I think is, if I were to put it into one thing, it's public transit.
Amen, sir. Amen.
Raise his hands. Yeah, I think having a really good public transportation system is like the first step to helping people who are in impoverished communities being more connected to opportunities, um, giving people other options besides just cars to get around. That also reduces, the amount of fuel we burn and things like that. Which, as I mentioned before, there's auto manufacturer lobbyists that are against, Dallas transitioning to
spend a whole lot of money making sure that Dallas stays very car dependent.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And with public transportation, you get walkability, which it took me a while to like, that word is kind of buzzy right now in certain circles, but took me a while to realize that that was something that I desire and enjoy, and everybody does. It's like, what parts of town do I like to go to in any city, or like things like that. It's places you like to that are enjoyable to walk around, experience on your feet. It's so simple, but Dallas has a lot of pavement, a lot of parking lots, and with the zoning and things like that, it's not very enjoyable to go from the CVS on one corner to the bar a block over. You're gonna have to cross over like a 4-lane road and then like another 6-lane road. So like,
which is terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be my number one thing, I would say.
Have you taken the time to really like play out why that's like, what are the values that underlie that, or like is there a faith connection for that?
The faith connection, I think it's just to go like all the way to the bottom of it. I guess it would be that I mentioned Eden before. I think there's a future that I desire where there's just more trees in the city. I see you there. It's
preach.
I feel it. And good parks, like the idea of a park, when I say the word in my mind, is like, okay, it's got like a jungle gym. But our creative energy, I think, can go so much more into like integrating nature and city, and technology can bridge that gap. But it goes, on the faith aspect, it goes to a fundamental belief that, and I mentioned this in my last article, that the fundamental struggle of humanity is to order chaos, and I forget what the other thing is, that we need a deeper connection to nature. So I mean, when you look at the world as a blank slate, it's like pre buildings and bridges or anything, there is, a jungle with tigers in it and things like that. So there is a fair amount of chaos that you have to deal with. And I think reframing how we look at that, where we like look at something that may be threatening and trying to like build block it out, and like make us separate from nature, is one direction we've gone that I don't really agree with.
Yeah, either separate from nature, or like that our role in this idea of having dominion over ends up meaning that like we just get to dictate and like abuse, essentially, which I think is just one of the greatest, most terrible interpretations of that Genesis 1 text, right? Or maybe it's Genesis 2. Either way, like whichever creation narrative that is. But I love that you said trees. So one of my friends is a pastor out in DC, and his church just got a grant for like, I think like $1.5 million or something. Like, it's a huge grant, but they're partnering with churches in communities literally to plant trees, because they know that in parts of big cities, the areas that have less trees are hotter. And there's statistics and data that shows the hotter it is, the more aggression there is, and the more aggravated, aggressive violence there is. And so his big thing is like, literally by helping people plant trees in their communities, we're reducing violence and suffering in cities. And I'm like, it seems so simple, right? Why is it so hard?
It's so simple. Yeah. I saw a headline too that I want to investigate more, but there was a city in Colombia that put trees all over their city and plants on the sides of buildings, and it reduced the temperature, average temperature, by like 1.5 degrees Celsius or 2 degrees Celsius. So yeah, I mean, I think the answer sometimes is pretty simple. I mean, how you the hoops you jump through to build all those cities can be complex, but there's something about trees I've always found like deeply spiritual.
Yeah.
It's like going into the forest is sort of where I find my peace. And so I think when you look at the city as a place where like you're hurrying, you're anxious, and you're focused ultimately on most of the things I think won't matter at the end of the day, or at the end of your life, or whatever. And we have to focus on these things, but it's like nature's on a different time. The trees are on a different time, and I'm interested in being closer to trees for sure.
Tapping into that time. Well, and I love like so much how movies tie into this, right? Like you have, I'm thinking of Avatar, right? How there's like that one main tree where they all tap into it, or even like Ferngully back in the day. Like there's always like this central tree that is so foundational for the integration into the whole community or whatever. Like the between the creatures and nature is like so surrounds around this tree. I do think there's something very spiritual about trees.
Yeah, and I remember one time, a couple things. I think that imagery probably comes from the tree of life idea.
Absolutely.
In the Bible. And the other thing, I remember looking at a Spanish Bible once, and a friend of mine who knows Spanish really well read the back. He was like, I want to know how they summarize the Bible on the back of this Bible. And it was really beautiful. It was like, this is the story of two gardens. It's like, it starts with the tree of life, and then it ends with the tree in Revelation, this tree that's always producing fruit. And it's also the tree of life. But and then it said something beautiful like, this is the story what's happening between those two trees.
Yeah, the unfolding narrative between two trees.
Yeah.
Which then makes you really realize that Zach Galifianakis was really onto something between two ferns, right? Like maybe that was just a deeper play that he was doing.
What? It seems to be.
Dude, this is really awesome. I love what you're doing. I love so much that you have this investment and deep interest in the way you're expressing, like, just the creative avenue of using writing as a tool to allow yourself. It's almost like a journaling of yourself, right? A journaling of those things that you're curious and interested about, and just sharing it with the world. And like, one, I love that we have technology that allows us to do this and be like, whether anybody reads this or not, I'm going to do it for my own edification, but like, there's something valuable. I think sometimes like that's what podcasting is for me too, is that like, I love to be able to just have conversations with people who are exploring and doing cool things in life and curious about the inner workings of life and faith and all these things. And like getting to share that with people, like what a gift to be able to reconnect with somebody, that I've known for all these years, and get to hear about the things that are happening and share your story with people that let them like hear that story as well, and hope that they'll find some point of connection too, right? Like,
totally.
Y'all go check out on Substack Stained Glass Graffiti, because you'll get to have another sense of Stephen's brilliant writing. But ultimately, who knows what kind of connections come out of that, right? Like, That's one of the things that I love so much about this, is that there's there's so many points of connection and growth and like being able to learn from one another that I'm so grateful for. Like I'm grateful that we could, even though we're like sitting on other sides of a screen, even though we're in the same city, like it's just a really cool opportunity to connect. So
I agree.
Hear me saying I'm super grateful for you, man.
Oh, thank you, man. Yeah, I'm super grateful for you as well. I know we've reconnected at different points.
Yeah.
And that could have easily fallen by the wayside. But there was like the critical time before I moved to Fredericksburg when I was in your small group Bible study, and that was a really cool time that had a big impact on my faith in my life. And here we are now reconnecting again. So yeah,
I know, right? Isn't that funny?
Yeah,
just the cycles that we go through.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, final thought here. What's one big thing you're really wrestling with?
One big thing I'm really wrestling with, I think, I enjoy writing about this stuff, and I'm not sure, like, I guess where the interest goes, because I don't know if it stays in writing or if I get more involved in like technical aspects of being the hands of rebuilding Eden is how I would put it. So yeah, I think I guess what my engagement is with these things that I care deeply about. That's something I'm struggling with.
Well, maybe someone's going to hear this and be like, "Ooh, I have an idea for Steven." So if you're hearing this right now, you want to reach out to Steven. Where can people find you on the interwebs other than stained glass graffiti?
I do have a YouTube channel, and my Instagram channel is the same name, which is Mackintosh Media. And Mackintosh spelled Mackintosh. And the Instagram does like mainly poetry with typography. So, and a lot of that is ecologically based. And the YouTube I don't post on as much, but I sometimes do like music video type things, putting sound and image together. So all these things to try and utilize creativity for me to process things, and ultimately what I think are advocating for good things.
I said last question, but this made me think of another question.
Yeah.
What do you want to see? I'm going to tap into your futurist.
Mm-hmm.
What do you want to see out of like social media or like social connection or digital relationships, digital community? What are you hoping to see out of that in the next couple of years?
That's a really good question, because I've struggled deeply with that. I got rid of my accounts at one point in time, and then, like I said, I wanted to get connected with people again. And I think it's really tough. It's sort of a tool that, like, it's so powerful. We have a really hard time managing it, and I think it's more powerful than we're like ready for. That's what I believe. So I think what I would like to see, honestly, is a lot of people in younger generations like Gen Z and Gen Alpha, who are growing up on this stuff, and I'm seeing a lot of like recursive sarcasm around like, why is my life so attached to this screen? And I would love to see people just log off more and care more about, you can have this as a tool, but ultimately your life, your social life, and like how you even navigate opportunities, it's fuller when it's done face to face.
Love that.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Yeah, back to the ordering chaos. Like, is social media, these digital platforms, causing more chaos, or are we able to use them as tools to order chaos? And I think it can be both, right? It just depends on how they're utilized. But sadly, it feels like typically they're used to create more chaos than order it, at least currently.
So yeah, it's I don't know if it's just my algorithm, but I'm starting to get more into stuff that's like mental wellness type of content, which I think is cool. And I'll even see some reels on Instagram that like start with like something to catch your attention, like a pretty girl or something, and then it like switches to like hey, log off Instagram. Someone like speaking to you directly, like, hey, you spend enough time on Instagram. And I'm like, oh, okay.
How do you know me so well?
Yeah.
Why do you know all the things about me?
Exactly.
Well, this is really awesome. Hey, thank you for your time, Stephen. Thank you for like being willing to put yourself out there and be vulnerable about these things. I think that's really honorable. And I'm inspired by it. And I always look forward to reading what you're putting out, man. So I look forward to continue having these connections over the course of time. And who knows how we'll find more ways to collaborate in the future, but I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me on, Phil. It's really a pleasure.
All right, y'all. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. And we'll catch you next time on our next episode. Take care.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Collective Voice,
the premier podcast of the 787 Collective.
Click the link in our show notes to connect with us and learn how you can be the lucky recipient of free 787 Collective swag.
And don't forget, when you rate and review us, you're tricking the algorithm for the common good.